President Trump, behind us here at the White House, got there partly by talking tough on immigration. But he hasn't been talking much at all lately about DACA, hasn't been talking about touching protections for those so-called dreamers, at least not yet. But now there are some new questions about where this all goes next. USA Today, have you seen this? Reporting 23-year-old Juan Manuel Montes was deported to Mexico a couple of months ago. The paper says he was granted deportation protection twice under DACA. But they say on the night of February 17th, he didn't show ID or proof of his status when he was approached by a border protection officer. Montes says he left his wallet in a friend's car and was told he couldn't go back and get the documents he needed. The Department of Homeland Security told USA Today they cannot confirm the details of this deportation. USA Today's Alan Gomez is one of the reporters who broke this story. He joins me now alongside David and Julie here on set. So, Alan, where is Montes now? What has happened since that night on February 17th?
Well, ever since that night, he's been living down in western Mexico. That's as close as I can tell you. When my colleague met him down there, he asked that that not be publicized. He didn't want this to be a thing where he's constantly being harassed, so he asked that he wanted to tell his story once, get it out there, and explain what happened. And so now he's living down there while his attorneys in the United States filed a lawsuit against the federal government to compel them to release details about what exactly happened that night. They've been asking for months, they've been waiting, and so now this is going to move into the federal court system to see how much information Customs and Border Protection has and how much they can turn over.
Talk about the legal steps here, because that lawsuit, I think, was filed yesterday, right? And so where would they go at this point? Is it about more information, or is it about taking action against the administration, or is that down the road if it comes to that?
Exactly. That sort of stuff comes down the road. Resolving his case, trying to get him back to the United States, that comes down the road. This is the very first step in the process. His attorneys filed the Freedom of Information Act request regarding his case, regarding that deportation. They didn't get an answer, and so they're filing this lawsuit in Southern California to try to get a judge to order CBP to release that information, and then we'll get to those next steps about what happened specifically in his case.
Alan, you report that Montes has a few minor convictions, one for shoplifting, 3 for driving without a license. Talk about whether that's grounds for deportation.
Quite simply, absolutely not. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, that's the federal agency that adjudicates these cases, that approves DACA and that revokes DACA for people. And on their website, they actually use the example of driving without a license as an offense that is not considered when either approving or denying DACA. So that's something that's considered so low profile, so minor, that it doesn't even come into the equation. To have your DACA revoked, you have to either commit a felony, what they call a significant misdemeanor, that could be a violent offense that could involve a bit of prison time, or an accumulation of at least 3 minor misdemeanors. So according to them, he has 1 strike because of that shoplifting charge, but he doesn't reach that 3, and those driving without a license offenses don't factor into it at all.
Alan, stick around. I want to turn to our panel here, because President Trump on February 16th was talking about DACA. Listen to what he had to say.
You have some absolutely incredible kids. I would say mostly. They were brought here in such a way. It's a very, very tough subject. We are going to deal with DACA with heart.
David?
You know, it's really interesting. This is a big dilemma for the White House, because as tough as Trump has talked on immigration, even his closest advisors who are hardliners on immigration understand the political calculus here, that the DACA participants, which number almost 1 million, are some of the most sort of sympathetic cases. These are kids who were brought here, they didn't have a say in it, and they grew up mostly here. President Obama always talked about them as strivers, people trying to, American all but papers. And so to overturn that, to officially get rid of DACA, would produce a major outcry, and I think boomerang back politically on the White House. But to not fully support it allows it to sort of live in this sort of limbo status.
Right,
and I wrote a story a few weeks ago talking about advocates saying, look, we're not advising people to sign up new to this program because you're announcing yourself, you're coming forward at a time when this administration is looking to deport more people. And this is an exact kind of case that you're talking about today that advocates are going to point to and say, look, they're going to actually go after these people, sort of behind the scenes, not publicize it, but actually boost their deportation numbers by going after people even potentially essentially who have these protections.
Julie, is there any political incentive for the White House now to get out of this limbo when it comes to DACA?
It's a tough one, and just having that human face, you know, an example now, an emotional example of the repercussions of some of these policies. I'm wondering what kind of outreach, if any, the White House is doing to this individual and his attorneys, or vice versa. I'm curious to see how it develops from a public relations perspective for the White House.
The White House actually has been focusing more on the opposite. Those who have been, victimized by immigrants who are here illegally. Some sat with the president in his box during the address to Congress and met with him in the Oval Office.
Alan, do you have any reporting on White House reaction here yet, or any guidance on, to Julie's point here, her question, has there been any outreach on either side to the White House?
Well, from the White House so far, we haven't heard anything, but I can tell you the Department of Homeland Security is fighting back on this pretty hard. They're saying that they don't have a record of him being deported, that they only have a record of him trying to re-enter the country, and they're questioning his DACA status. They're saying that it expired back in 2015. I've sent them documents showing that documents that he had that seemed to indicate that it was renewed in January of 2016 and was extended through 2018, and so it was valid for another 2 years. They haven't responded to that yet.
Your story has provoked some reaction already from members of Congress, and I'm thinking in particular of Steve King, who was tweeting a picture, essentially kind of toasting, this deportation. Your reaction, here's the tweet right here. "This one's for you," he says, with a link to your story, Alan. Reaction to that?
I mean, and I think this speaks to what you guys were just talking about, the idea of how difficult this is politically. On the one hand, you have, a vast majority, almost all Democrats, I think, support giving some sort of legal status to these dreamers. You have a good chunk of Republicans who have that sympathy for them and who have that soft spot for them and want to see something done for them. But I think Steve King speaks more to that base of Trump support that was very supportive of his anti-immigration message. And so I think that's what he's speaking to right there. And that's what he risks politically if he just completely adopts DACA and allows it to proceed.
I mean, if you look at the hardest line Congress members over the last few years, especially in 2013 when President Obama tried to go forward with a comprehensive bill, Steve King in the House and Jeff Sessions in the Senate. Sessions is now the Attorney General. These ideas are very close to the White House. This is what Donald Trump ran on. Steve King was one of the early endorsers, but he's one of the most outspoken. He doesn't, to him, the politics are different in Iowa, and so he's going to go out and continue to say that. But for others, it's a much more complicated situation. That's why Trump has not overturned this yet.
Very divisive, even inside the GOP, as you point out.
Absolutely, and it continues to be an issue, especially going forward. Maybe not in 2018, but certainly 2020. Latinos are among the fastest growing voter bloc. Asian Americans as well. And immigration is important to these groups.
David, Julie, thank you much. Alan Gomez, thank you for coming on to talk about your reporting in USA Today. You can catch that link online. Appreciate it.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.